Aloha and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we sit down with members of the House of Representatives to talk about issues, concerns, legislation moving through the halls of the state capitol. Today and throughout the session, you're going to be hearing a lot about the joint package. It is a collaboration of the House and Senate on an economic package to aggressively and comprehensively address the issue of cost of living here in Hawaii. Nearly half of our working families live paycheck to paycheck. The joint package is aimed at breaking that cycle. Joining us this morning is Representative Tom Brower. He is the chair of the Housing Committee, and Representative Justin Woodson. He is the chair of the Education Committee. Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Tom, for getting up so early.
Thank you.
Walking all the way to the state capitol.
I can come back later.
Yes, you can. But let's start with you then, since you're all ready to go. This joint package. Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, why should we be so excited about this?
The reason it's exciting to me is because in my years at the legislature, there's some things that I wanted to correct, and that was to have more collaboration, more input on our bills. Often a bill might be an individual legislator coming up with an idea. So we've took some ideas regarding housing, then we've met with community members as well as a number of legislative leaders, and we've come up with something that is unique. And we saw that both, besides House members, Senate members, as well as the governor, showed a great interest, and we came out with one voice, and we put this legislation forward.
So let's talk about your particular pillar in this package, and that's the affordable housing. What is in this bill?
When we create legislation, I always feel that let's get back to basics, and let's talk to people who build things on why their view is that we don't have enough affordable housing. And some reoccurring themes came up. One was lack of infrastructure, and another one was cumbersome rules, government regulation. So in the package, we have attempted to overcome some of these shortcomings, and there's funding mechanisms as well as some measures that can reform some government regulation. But at the same time, while we support these measures, we want to air it with the community. So these bills will go through a number of committee hearings, and the public will have further input, and then if all goes well, we will have significant legislature that the governor will support.
Well, it's going to be an interesting session as we go along. Representative Woodson, let's talk about your pillar. One of the data has shown that one of the key obstacles to keeping our working families in that cycle of paycheck to paycheck is the expensive issue of childcare and early learning. Education, that's your pillar. Tell us a little bit about why we should care about this particular package and bill.
But first, let me just say that this is an unprecedented time. For the first time, you have the House of Representatives, the State Senate, the Governor's Office, and the executive, private sector, and also public sector coming together, coalescing around the idea, what can we do to make people's lives better? This is the first time that this is actually happening in the state of the union as it relates to Hawaii. And as it relates to our particular part, we have House Bill 2543. It really provides a platform to provide universal coverage for 3 and 4-year-olds over a 10-year period of time or less.
Now, why the bills have been filed, so people have been having a chance to take a look at them. Your particular the education bill has not yet, I don't believe, has been scheduled for hearing yet. But what kind of pushback, or are you getting any kind of pushback on this, the child care early learning?
Sure, we are. But let me just first say, so this particular proposal, it works with the Department of Human Services and the private sector to more quickly build out access for early learning opportunities. So we want to focus on the underserved communities, but we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to attend an early learning center if they so choose. So we are not only looking at establishing these locations at places where people live, and also where people work, even where potentially people play, like at exercise facilities or yoga studios. And for teachers, we are looking at establishing daycare centers or also early learning centers at their place of work so that they don't have to go off out of their way to drop off their child. They can just go straight to school, drop off their kids in these opportunities to where they're in a safe and environment to which they're learning, and they can go back and do their business as it relates to their classroom setting.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, if I may say.
No, absolutely.
And to your question now, so one of the main issues I think is that people are concerned that our current infrastructure with public preschools is going to be dismantled. Please know that that is not the case. We are working with the Executive Office of Early Learning, which currently administers early learning classrooms across the state of Hawaii, in relation to the Early Learning Board and the Department of Education, the DOE, the BOE, the Board of Regents, and the University of Hawaii. All of this meets a continuum of education spectrum that we're going to take to address the issue of early learning in its totality. And what I'm trying to say is that our Executive Office of Early Learning establishes a very high-quality public pre-K system. In fact, if you take a look at some of the outside organizations like the National Institute for Early Education and Research, they say that our public pre-K system is amongst the best in the country. So we are not going to dismantle that. But what we want to do is really complement some of the efforts that are already happening right now.
That's really important to remember. We're not dismantling anything. And to you, the same question, Representative Brower. Are you hearing any pushback on the bill? I mean,
well, everything goes well in the beginning, and I look forward actually to people bringing a debate, because I always find that in our system of government, we argue about things, we debate, but then after the smoke clears, we always have better legislation. So I really welcome early on people who may have questions about this legislation to come forward, because we do want to, as best we can, take care of those concerns, craft good legislation, and then hopefully turn it into law and look forward to a brighter future.
In the 55 seconds that we have remaining, I have a real quick question for you. This is a package. There is the housing pillar. There is the child care early learning center pillar. There is the addressing the income inequality pillar as it deals with minimum wage and tax relief for working families. Does that mean that if housing legislation goes down, what does that mean? Will it impact?
Well, each item can live on its own, but in legislation as well as in your personal life, everything is better with a holistic approach, because everyone depends on everyone else. And what people might not realize is anything that I want to attempt to do at the legislature, I need people who may disagree with me to support my issue. So there really is a collaboration that's mandatory and needs to take place.
Okay. Well, thanks to both of you for getting up this early, and for you for walking all the way from where you live to the Capitol. And thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week for Live at the Legislature. Aloha.
Welcome back to Live at the Legislature for our weekly Senate segment. I'm the Senate Communications Director, Jesse Broder Van Dyke, and we're coming to you live from the Senate chamber this week. Our guest this week is Senator Brian Taniguchi. Thanks so much for getting up early to be here with us. Senator Taniguchi represents Manoa, Makiki, Punchbowl, and Papakolea, and he's the chairman of the Labor, Culture, and Arts Committee. In the last segment, our House counterparts were talking a little bit about the joint legislative package that was introduced this year. It's the first time since 2004 that the Senate, House, and Governor have all come together before the session. Can you tell us a little bit about the package?
It's an exciting concept, I think. Back when I was, the Ways and Means Chair in 2004, I worked with then House Finance Chair, Doi Takamine, to kind of work on a package. So I know how that kind of thing really helps to build some momentum for the issues that we want to face and deal with. You know?
And one of the proposals this year is to raise the minimum wage, and that's going to be coming before your committee. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. We've been trying to deal with the issue of minimum wage for the last probably couple of years. Last year we were pretty close, but I think there's still some issues that we hadn't been able to overcome. With this joint package, I think it deals in part with the minimum wage, but it also addresses probably a broader spectrum of people. There are people that are affected by the minimum wage. A lot of companies currently pay more than the minimum wage. And so I think this combined package of raising the minimum wage as well as some tax credits for the working poor is really going to hit a larger group of people. And that's, I think, what we wanted to do.
And we can see on the screen right now the proposal to bring it up to $13 an hour in 2024. How does that differ from what you were working on last year?
Well, it's a little lower than we would have done last year. I think because we had it as a kind of a standalone issue, we're trying to address the DBED study that said that it'd take probably something like $17 an hour for a family to for a person to live in Hawaii and survive. And so we're trying to hit that mark at some point. But we believe that with this package, I think it'll help to alleviate a lot of those issues. And I like the fact that we can kind of work together and be sure that we have something at the end, unlike last year where we did not.
And part of the package of bills is to give early education to 3- and 4-year-olds?
Right, and so it's early education for people to provide more access to early education, and also housing to provide more, rental and housing for people to get into. And that way, I think a combination of things that really is going to make this a powerful package.
So even though the minimum wage is less than what's been discussed in the past with tax incentives, housing, and childcare, you're going to help people make ends meet?
Well, a lot of it is when we do these kinds of packages, there's a certain amount of compromise that we have to do, and so I think that's what we came up with, and I think we've all agreed to try to support this and get this package moving.
And where do the bills stand now, and how can people support the minimum wage increase if that's something they're interested in?
The House heard the bill, last week, and so they are probably in better position. I think what the Senate will probably do is wait for the House bill to come over and then have our hearing on that bill at that time.
Well, stay tuned. And you're also chairman of the Subcommittee on Labor, Culture, and the Arts, and one of the things you've been working on is the archives, which are currently stored on the Iolani Palace grounds, but they're not available for public display.
Yeah, we've last year was the 50th anniversary of the state capitol building, and so we worked with the state archives on that. We found out that they had a lot of resources and things that the public doesn't really have access to, and that the archives can't present to the public. And so we worked on a resolution last year to try to see if we can have a master plan where we can have a better, so the public can have better access to the materials that the archives has. And so this year we're trying to support a bill that might provide the archives with a planning kind of thing so that they can kind of design a building that would help them do that.
Well, one of my favorite events of the year is the Art at the Capitol, which is coming up this year on April 3rd, which is the first Friday, from 5 to 7 p.m. Tell us about what you have planned this year. Well,
this year we're still in the planning stages, actually. This is going to be our, 12th year, and so we've done we've highlighted a lot of the art features at the Capitol, and so this year I think what we're looking at maybe the portraits in the governor's office, and so we'll kind of focus on that. And another real interesting part is that we're going to probably have the staff people at the Capitol do portraits of their bosses. That's the plan right now.
That sounds scary.
Yeah, it is kind of scary. Yeah. But it's going to be fun, I think. So,
yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to developing my artistic talent.
Yeah. So it's going to be the first Friday in April. So
okay.
It'll start about 4:30ish, and it'll go into the evening, and so people can come to the Capitol and look at all the artwork, public art that's in the state Capitol.
Yeah. So there's some priceless works of art here that are on display, loaned from the State Art Museum to the legislators, and normally only people who meet with them get to see them, but on this one day, their doors are open for everyone to take a look.
Right. So 12, 13 years ago, somebody confronted me and said, hey, you have all this art in the state Capitol and nobody gets to see it, only the lobbyists and people who work there. And so we decided decided to have this Art at the Capitol to kind of address that, and at least one night a year have the public come in and be able to look at all the art in the building.
That's great. So that's going to be, once again, April 3rd from 5 to 7 p.m.
Right.
We have a little bit more time, so let's go back to the serious subjects and talk more about the joint package. We've been focusing on the Aloha United Way's Alice report that shows, like you mentioned, people really need at least $17 an hour to make ends meet, but we're trying to make up the gap with housing, affordable housing, and early education. Tell us a little bit more about the package.
Well, the early education part of it is important because apparently for a lot of working families, young families especially, that child care cost is is very, very high.
Right.
It's a large percentage of their they have to pay for the income, and so we have about half of our 3 and 4 year olds who aren't able to go to preschool and are not, therefore not ready for school, right? Or not as ready as they could be for school. And so that's, I think, a big chunk that people don't really see the cost in there, but there's I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of the working families that this cost will be taken care of over the next couple of years.
So it'll both help parents make a living, and it'll help the students get a head start in the future. Right. Well, great. Thank you so much for getting up early to join us today.
My pleasure. Yeah,
it goes by pretty fast.
Oh yeah.
But we'll be back here every Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning, and you can catch a replay of the show Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Alelo. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Aloha.
Thanks, Jesse.
Good morning and welcome back to Live at the Legislature, where every week in this segment we speak to representatives and senators from the minority side to discuss issues going through the state capitol. Our guest today is Representative Bob McDermott. He serves House District 40, which encompasses Eva Beach, and serves on the committees on finance, housing, interstate commerce, public safety, and veterans and military affairs. Representative McDermott, good morning.
Thank you, Kyle. Great to be with you this morning.
So today we're going to talk about education and teachers' pay raises. So before I guess I go to the specifics of that, you have 8 kids, and they are all either alumni of or currently in a DOE school, correct?
That's correct.
And so as a father, what's your assessment of the state education system?
Well, I think it's like anything, right? You get out of it what you put into it. So you have great parents who are very interactive with the students and the teachers. I see that particularly at the elementary schools across the board. They have an open house or a parent-teacher night. The place is packed. When you get to high school, not so much, right? The kids are older. They've kind of figured out what they want to do or what they don't want to do, and the parents have kind of launched them at that point. So like anything else, you get out of it what you put into it. So you can have a great school, but if the child and the parent aren't interested, it doesn't matter. Conversely, you can have a crappy school, but if the child and parent really work it, they can get as much out of there as you can at a great school. So that's the answer to that.
And one of the biggest things, this is now the 3rd year that the state has, or the legislature has tried to find a funding mechanism for education. 2 years ago it was the CONAM, last year it was the GET increase, and then this year we have HB 2671, which it would be a constitutional amendment to allow the Board of Education to levy a property tax along with the counties. And so you're also a realtor when you're not in the legislature. So what's your assessment on this year's proposal, and how do you think that's going to affect?
Well, I'll tell you what. So let's go back a couple years. When they first came up with the proposal, this was kind of same-sex marriage was removed a couple years, and so during that period, I was saying, let the people decide. Let the people decide. Any government that empowers the people is a better government. Government closer to the people and their voice. So I voted for the amendment to proceed to let the people have a choice on it. It ended up getting killed in the courts, and they never had a choice on it. But in that time frame, that process between the time the session ended and the ultimate court hearings, the public certainly spoke to me anyway, and they said, we don't want this. No way. And so we are far enough removed from the same-sex marriage issue, and my experience from that last iteration tells me I'm not going to vote for this. Now, you could characterize it as voting against teachers, but nobody's against teachers. Teachers are mom and apple pie. Everybody loves their teachers. How do we get them more money? That's the question. Is this vehicle the right way to do it? No. And if you just look at it, it's, allow the Board of Education, follow me for a minute, allow the Board of Education to set tax rates and tax policy to raise money from the schools, for the schools. Can you name one person on the Board of Education? Because I sure can't. And I work down here. I don't know who they are. And they're going to tell me how much taxes I got to pay? There's no way. And aside from that, there's no enabling legislation that's accompanying this measure that I can see, which means how much of this new money would go to teacher salary? Would it supplement or supplant? Meaning, we raise $100 million from this new tax, and that goes to the budget. Well, we're just going to back out our $100 million contribution we made last year, and we're going to spend it on homeless. So we raised the taxes, they got more money, but we pulled back our baseline commitment. So in there, in what you'd have enabling legislation, you would have a baseline commitment, say it has to be the rolling average of the last 3 years that was spent on teacher salaries must be spent moving forward in perpetuity along with this supplement. Otherwise, trust me, trust me, we'll take it out. We owe $100 million. Okay, we'll give them 75 and say, look, we gave you 75 while we took 25 for ourselves and our pet projects. That's the way we do it down here. The bill will ultimately fail. It'll fail either at the ballot box when the people vote on it, or it may not end up getting out of here. I think the Senate's probably inclined to vote for it, but I think the House, you're going to have some people. Last time it passed unanimously through the House of Representatives, 51 yeses, because you were letting the people decide. We've gotten enough feedback. I believe that I'm going to cast a no vote on it.
And this is something that everyone in the legislature is concerned about: cost of living, and the minority takes a specific stance, certainly against new taxes and fees. And you also sit on the Committee on Finance, and if I'm not mistaken, the numbers are about $10.5 million short for teachers this year, and then roughly $26 million the next year. Is this, if we raise property taxes and we also offset with a minimum wage or other tax incentives, is this a concern that it raises cost of living more for your constituents?
So, well, any new tax would, yes. When you talk about budget numbers this early on, I'm not really that concerned about it. As Frank Fossey said, liars can figure and figures can lie. So you can put up any set of numbers you want to paint any picture you want. And quite often in politics, that's done. We have a good finance chair, Sylvia Luke. She's honest, straightforward. I trust her. I guess that's not a popular thing for a Republican to say, but I've watched her in action, and she's fair, and that's all I can ask for. She has not penalized our district. Matter of fact, we have a new building at Campbell High School, $40 million. So, and it's set to open any moment, actually. So I am happy with the job that she's doing. But you asked about new legislation for a new tax, and I don't support that. And you see the surveys, people are leaving Hawaii for the first time in our history. People are actually a net decrease in the number of folks migrating versus immigrating.
So is this something, there were threats, I think it was a Civil Beat article that mentions there would be cuts to bus services, IT, and other benefits. Or is this something that you're worried about sitting in the committee, or do you believe that there will be some sort of mechanism to fund the DOE and teachers' pay?
The teachers will have enough money. Everything will get funded. We hear this every year, right? But one of the things I don't like is when they say, well, teachers, compared to the rest of the mainland, they're paid below average. We have to understand we work in Hawaii. We live in Hawaii. All wages are below average because that's the price of paradise. People will come and live here and work for less. They'll work for less so they can live here. And so when the union leadership comes out and say, well, compared to Arkansas, they're well underpaid. Well, yeah, but compare our doctors and any other profession. and it's the same deal compared to the cost of living. And you can't do that. It's not a fair comparison to make, because we all pay the price of paradise, which is lower wages for living here.
Right. Well, it looks like we're just out of time.
I can't believe it.
Representative McDermott, thank you for joining us this morning.
This goes a lot faster than those Democrats. I mean, those guys were literally putting me to sleep. You heard me
We'll have to have you next week to continue the conversation. The viewers at home, thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us on High House GOP on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we'll see you next week.
Okay.